This is from the memoirs of Catharina Schrader, a midwife. She wrote a daybook, a diary, a book of all her deliveries, more than 3,000 over her long career as a midwife, so 130 average a year. She decides late in life to pull out the unusual ones and write them up. This book of unusual cases gets published, and she titles it not My Memoirs, but Memoirs of the Women. She dedicates it to the women who gave birth, to whom she delivered either safely or not safely. She was still delivering even in her 84th year of age, though not as frequently. She says, I sat and thought over what miracles the Lord had performed through my hands to unfortunate distressed women in childbirth. So I decided to take up the pen in order to refresh once more my memory, to glorify and make great God Almighty for his great miracles bestowed on me. Not me, but you, O Lord, be the honor, the glory till eternity. And also in order to alert my descendants so that they can still become educated. And I have pulled together the rare occurrences from my notes. She tells us a little bit of autobiographical detail. She says, in my 38 years living in Hallam in Friesland, I saw my good, learned, and highly esteemed, and by God and the people loved husband go to his God to the great sadness of me and the inhabitants, leaving 6 small children in my 38 years of age. But then it pleased God to choose me for this important work. I forced almost through good doctors and the townspeople, because I was at first struggling against this, because it was such a weighty affair. Also, I thought that it was for me and my friends below my dignity. But finally I had myself won over. This was also the Lord's wish. So this is her opening. In other words, I was a middle-class woman, and maybe only lower-status women should be midwives. But finally the doctors who she'd been assisting and townspeople said, you should really do this. And she decides, because it's the Lord's wish too, she of course sees things in a religious context, that she should do this, and decides to go ahead and be a midwife for the rest of her life. This is the first case. You can get a sense about what cases she highlighted. 1693, on 9 January, fetched to Jan Wobbe's wife Pity in Hallam, a very heavy labor, came with his face upwards. A dangerous birth for the child and very difficult for me. The afterbirth had to be pulled loose, but everything went well. What are the expectations of somebody who's reached over 80? Might they be the same as somebody who's reached over 100 today? Do we expect them to reflect on their life? How have things changed? She has a sense of self that comes through in here that is, in part, probably because she lives to be so old. She has a sense of self that is rooted in her faith, rooted in religion, as people tended to do in the 17th century or early 18th century. She talks about the miracles that God has performed. She was a Protestant woman. The sentence also talks about God calling her to do these kinds of things. What does this tell us about the sense of understanding about God's calling or God's purpose for people who were raised in Calvinist backgrounds? But is she typical? Is she atypical? Would other people be talking about their God calling them to be in their particular profession the same way? What were their ministers telling them? You can research this by reading Calvinist sermons, many of which have been translated and made available. What comes through in this document about why these terrible things happened? People in the pre-modern era, like today, think that the death of children is a horrible thing. Why does God allow this to happen? This is a good theological question, and she wrestles with it, although she's not a trained theologian. How much do her words reflect what we know from more learned sources about people's understandings about good and evil, or about unfortunate things in the world? We get clearly that this is a woman who was placed in circumstances where she needed to support herself and her children. If you were a woman with small children or a widower, what could you do in the 17th century? What were your options? How would she have supported herself? How would her life have been different had she been a man whose wife died? And he was 38, and he had 6 kids. What would he have done? He would have married again, right away. And he may very well have married a woman who had 2 or 3 children. So I think that this gets students into issues of blended families, which students tend to think of as a very modern phenomenon.